Hi, I'm Ishi Abel with the Horse Human Connection Matrix. And today I have with me Amanda Held from Hooves. And she also has a book that is about to be released,
Healing in Harmony.
Healing in Harmony. And she's going to weigh in on Charlie Bucks. And she brings a very unique perspective because of the work that she does. And I can't wait to hear how she helps to unpack some of this and all of the nuances that affect human relationships and how we come together with horses as well. Welcome, Amanda.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And it's an honor to be a part of this unpacking. And so I did listen to your original story where you share what happened. And then I listened to Kimberly and Asha and their perspectives as well. I just want to say, everything that Kimberly and Asha said, I think I wholeheartedly support, I agree with. And I feel like what we're really doing here is we're painting this holistic picture.
Mhm.
And if you've ever worked with me or if you know anything about the work that I do, I believe that it is paramount to never consider anything from one perspective. If we really want to be holistic in our viewpoint and our ability to influence and change our life, I think it's important to lay all the information out on the table and then make a decision based on all the information on how you want to move forward. I'm coming from quite a different perspective. It's not a horse training perspective, but it's more of an energetic perspective. And if you've ever done any energy research, Rupert Sheldrake, I recommend his work to everybody. He does a lot of work in the morphic field, but the research and work that I've built the Equine Wisdom Institute around is largely based off of the laws of nature and quantum entanglement. So that's the approach that I'm going to be taking today in unpacking what is going on. And so I have tried to, I guess I want to start by saying I believe that when we generalize, we polarize.
Mhm.
And I think one of the biggest challenges, and especially listening to the conversation with Kimberly in the horse training realm, is that the answer is always, it depends.
You had me at always. I was like, wait a minute, we're not supposed to say always and never, but in that sentence, it works.
Yes, right. And so I also believe we can't say always and never, except when we're working in the context of universal laws and principles,
Okay.
because the laws are always absolute. So in the work I've been doing over the past 15 years, I've really learned how to see the laws of nature at play
Mhm.
in every situation that is brought in front of me. And just to give people a little bit of background on me, I started working with wild horses and becoming a horse trainer in 2003. So my work has largely been in wild horse gentling. I am also a little bit neurospicy, so I don't have autism, but I have pretty escalated
Neurospicy. Okay.
ADHD, which is, really become a superpower to me, but my brain works a little bit different and it works very much in patterning. And I'm always like, I see patterns in everything, which I think has helped me be really effective in working with horses, getting last chance horses, being able to get horses to places that no one else can get them, because horses also really love patterns. Patterns to horses actually bring them safety and security. So,
It totally makes sense. Yeah, as
yes,
prey animals, it totally makes sense.
absolutely. So clarity and patterns, that's really how I work with my horses. And I would love to meet Kimberly one day because, man, I resonated with everything that she was saying. So she's awesome. I really enjoyed what she had to say about the situation.
Yeah, she's
So before we dig in, there's some fundamentals that I just want to kind of touch on. And one of the things I put in my notes about horse training, and I am no longer a horse trainer, and I no longer give lessons unless something crazy comes out of the blue. My life has now turned to the equine assisted healing space. So I run 5-day healing intensives, primarily for veterans, but sometimes for other groups of people as well. And we learn about the laws of nature. We learn about what I call the human blueprint. So our own special intrinsic driving forces. And then we also work with how does the horse work with who we are at an intrinsic level.
Mhm.
And in doing this, because, I came from the old school horse training, then into the natural horsemanship, and then into the realizing that horses are incredibly intelligent, sentient beings. Then I didn't want to do anything to reprimand them or confront them. And then I created a whole mess there. And so I like to feel like I've landed somewhere in this space of neutrality, saying always it depends, but looking at each case individually, because it is in the minutia that we get the information. But one of the things I've seen over and over and over and over again in the equine assisted healing space, because most of my clients are not horse people, they're just coming to heal, is that horses will reflect the life inside of the human. That is why they're so powerful in the therapeutic space. But at the same time, this innate ability that they possess, because they're attuned to our nervous system, because they're prey animals, because they have a social hierarchy similar to humans, whatever all these reasons are that make horses horses, this isn't something they can turn off ever. So every session that any human being ever has with a horse is always a therapy session in some form. Now, most people choose not to see that, and many, many people compensate for that by shutting the horse down and putting it into learned helplessness and calling it a good broke horse. But somewhere in there, at some point, that horse has seen you.
It's a
And if
type
you're,
of it's a type of avoidance, is what you're describing.
oh, well, absolutely, because people who are hurt and don't understand, and this is not from a place of judgment, because I used to be one of those people. It's a place of observation. But the reason that horses can trigger us so deeply is because they see us. And if we're not used to being seen, or if we don't like what's being seen, it's triggering, it's confronting, right? And so when you don't know what to do with that information, a lot of times you feel like you have to overpower it.
Right.
And
We
I
try to
see,
control situations in order to feel safe. And if we don't want to
absolutely,
be seen, or things are being uncovered, we may not feel safe.
absolutely. So this is a systemic issue in the entire society of horses because a lot of people, myself included, get into horses because horses give us a level of empowerment
Mhm.
that maybe we can't find anywhere else. And if you are seeking external empowerment, then that typically means that internally you're disempowered.
Right. I noticed the demographic of women with horses, and like 10, 15 years ago, and started like mentally noting that a lot of women that I'd met who had horses were kind of in broken relationships, looking for that empowerment, exactly as you're saying. I mean, the demographics show that clearly, but we've made a lot of progress, I think, in the last decade.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to say something potentially confronting here, but this is a pattern in doing all of the work that I've done over the past 20 years. Many people look to their horses to provide them with something they didn't get from their parents. It's just, and I'm, I did it too, came into the horse world very broken, but our voids in our childhood
Mhm.
create our values as an adult. And instead of being taught, because we're just not taught how to fill our own voids at this stage in humanity, we start to look at outside things to do that for us, right? And so sometimes people become overachievers and maybe they do like dirt bike racing or something that involves inanimate objects, which tends to go better for people. But the horses, they see right through. They see all of it, and I know the whole nervous system thing is a huge buzz right now. I mean, it's very true, but I like to say, like, when we're being inauthentic or when when we're not fully owning what is inside of us, and what's inside of us can feel really ugly and still be okay to the horse if it's being expressed truthfully. But we've been told and we've been conditioned, if you show up and you're sad, or if you show up and you're angry, people aren't going to like you,
We're talking
right?
about congruence and how horses
Sure.
expose our incongruence, and that in our culture we're taught to be incongruent, and we have to be incongruent to function the way our culture is set up, the way workplaces are set up. But when we're with our horses, they would much prefer, in fact, insist that we be congruent, and they teach us that.
Absolutely. You said that beautifully. And so that is really, I guess, in essence, they're constantly tuned into and picking up on anything that we are repressing. And they can't turn that off. And I think the new wave of teaching is really waking people up and kind of busting some of these myths. Like, you can't be, if you're afraid, the horse is going to be afraid. Here's how I perceive this scenario. And again, I wholeheartedly agree with the other perspectives. This is just going to go deep, and I hope you're ready to go deep, because that's where my space is at. That's where I live, in the minutia. So there's obviously your component in here. And one of the things that I have seen over the years often is when we get horses that have a past.
Mhm.
And maybe we don't know exactly what the past is, but there's this whole narrative about who this horse is.
Mhm.
And, you have that in you, and then the horse can see that in you. And so it's like, oh, well, this horse is a bolter. This horse is a bucker. This horse is a biter. Okay, but those are all symptoms, and those are all results of something deeper. But when we have a narrative and we think, oh, this horse is that, that horse reads that on our face. Horses respond to our beliefs. That is a breakthrough thing that I have discovered in my research over the past 15 years. They wholeheartedly, yes, they tune into our nervous system. That is a whole very valid thing. But horses respond to our beliefs. And our perspective is made up of a few things, right? And kind of like what you said, our past experiences. If you were a kid and you played with snakes and you had a pet snake and you loved them and you would catch them in the garden and you see a snake, your brain's gonna produce dopamine
Mhm.
and maybe some serotonin, right?
Mhm.
But if you were a kid and you were bit by a snake, or your dog was bit by a poisonous snake and it died, you're going to see a snake and you're going to release cortisol and adrenaline and epinephrine, right? So we are so biological my friend Stephen Gardner, he always says, are we sentient and intelligent spiritual beings, or are we slightly intelligent monkeys? And I'd like to believe that we're somewhere in the middle of that, right? So we have this spirituality and this divine connection, but we also are driven by our hormones. And no matter what happens in our life, our hormones are always going to come in and override us, no matter what. So if we are challenged, if our core values are challenged to a high enough degree, and I promise this will relate later, but if our intrinsic drivers and values are challenged to a high enough degree, I don't care how spiritual you are, I don't care how connected you are, I don't care how full of love you are, your biology is going to override you, and those hormones are going to start driving your bus. And so we have to look at the support of and challenge to our perspective. That is literally what governs every action or inaction or response or proactive thing that we do in our life.
What do you
Any,
mean by challenge to our perspective? Can you break that
Yep,
apart a little bit?
absolutely. Mhm. So we all have, and I teach a course called Discovering Your Human Blueprint, right? So, but we all have a blueprint. It's unique to us.
Mhm.
And so we have our intrinsic selves and we show up in the environment. And, at the end of the day, we're all waves and particles connected in oneness in the quantum field, right? But our body allows us to come here and have some separation so that we can have our own human experience. If you walk into the arena and Charlie comes up to you and he puts his head in your chest and takes a big breath and just, that's supportive. In that moment, you're going to be flood dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, right? And your body is going to have a physical response. And that physical response is also going to send a vibration or signal to Charlie.
He's going to be having the same kind of response if we're having that experience, correct?
Yes. If Charlie comes up and puts his teeth on you and pinches you, that's not going to release dopamine. That's going to release adrenaline.
Actually, I'm going to disagree there. My experience has been different. When he pinches with his teeth, I'm seeing it through a therapeutic lens, and my experiences have been really positive with being pinched. And it definitely releases a bunch of stuff and creates this shift. And I don't even know how to necessarily describe the physical sensations and the energetic sensations that happen. But it started with that horse at Liz Mitten Ryan's place that racked its teeth on my scalp and opened up my chakra. It's part of my experience. It's part of my perspective. It's part of my response.
So now when he does it to you, you don't see it as a threat. But what about the first time it happened and it caught you off guard and you didn't understand it yet and you hadn't processed it?
So the first time it happened, it didn't, I was warned. She stood there and said, he's going to bite you. This pony's going to bite you. And if you trust him, he won't bite you hard. But if you can't let go and trust him, he'll bite you harder. And I was like, a horse is going to bite me? Like, what? But he bit me and something happened. And it was delicious in a way, not in a weird, I like pain kind of way, but in an energetic release kind of way. And so okay, I never had an experience with a horse biting me in a bad way, ever.
Okay. So you were primed by another person. Hey, he's going to do this to you. What about when you fell off and got hurt? Did you see that as supportive in that moment when you were hurt?
The times I've come off a horse, no, it was not supportive at all.
So in that moment, it was challenging, right? And you've carried that challenge with you. Mm-hmm. And now it's governing the way that you're moving forward in your relationship with Charlie and your decision to ride or not ride or whatever, right? And it's escalating, which has led us to this situation. But in essence, every interaction that you have is either going to be supportive or it's going to be challenging. And that's going to influence the way that your brain releases its chemistry. It's critical. It's a piece that I haven't heard talked about a lot. I don't know if I've ever heard it talked about in the context of horses. A lot of my training is in human behavior. That's where that comes from, the human behavior work that I do. At the core level, it's either support of or challenge to our perspective. Mm-hmm. And we respond to every single thing in our environment that way. Now, when we're aware of that, and we have the tools to process through things that happen to us, and we shift our perspective, we can shift what brings us pleasure and what brings us pain by shifting our perspective. And that is really at the essence, the work that I do is helping people gain a holistic perspective. Mm-hmm. And then, like, I believe that we all should, if it's our life, we should be deciding, right? And so if you're not deciding, somebody's deciding for you. And so what I want to do in the time that we have today is kind of look at just another perspective. So you have a lot of different facts and opinions and thoughts and perspectives. And hopefully by the end of interviewing all the people that are going to weigh in on this, you can make a decision for you that's going to best help you and best help Charlie. And so I believe, and I have in my notes here, horse training doesn't work unless the horse trainer is teaching you to be a trainer.
Absolutely. And so the episode that you didn't watch or have a chance to listen to yet with Carissa, we deal with some of that. And I've already, from listening to you and Kimberly and Asha and Carissa, I already feel like a softening where in the beginning, I'm like, I don't know if I ever want to even ride again. And now I'm at a different place. And I notice how it continues to change as my awareness of different things is growing.
Absolutely. So I wrote here too, this is another thing that I see so often. And the question I always used to ask when I would get a horse training client in is, what do you want from your horse?
Mm.
What do you want from your horse? Because that's going to really largely depend on what we do and the whole basis of the training. And guess how many times somebody was able to answer that question immediately with clarity?
A lot.
Never,
No,
never,
never.
no, no. Mm-mm. People will say, I don't know, or, we want to show. Okay, but that's broad. Like, what are your expectations of your horse? What do you want from them? And so a lot of times people would say, like, they would come up with something. Okay, okay, I want to show. Okay, what do you believe that showing is going to give you? Well, it's going to give me the opportunity to go out and have fun and be social and have goals to work towards. Da, 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 da. Okay, and what will that give you? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, think about it. Like, what do you really want? Because at the end of the day, everything that we do is to gain a feeling, right? So how do you want your horse to help you feel? Or how
I
is accomplishing all of this going to help you feel? And so because they tune into our beliefs, all of our beliefs generate feelings.
mm-hmm.
And horses are so emotional. They're tuning into our feelings because our feelings are what carry a vibration.
Absolutely.
So if we're not looking at feelings and we're not looking at beliefs in our relationship with our horse and to our horse, we're going to have gaps. And those horses are great at putting our gaps right in front of our face with a little bow on it, which is amazing if you know how to work through those scenarios and situations, and frustrating if you don't, because, so many times it feels like, well, this pattern, it just keeps happening over and over again. And, I call it like running with a rubber band around your waist. You'll make progress. You're running, you think you've got it, and then boom, something will trigger and you just snap back and you're back at ground zero. And so if we don't deal with our beliefs, then we're going to keep living Groundhog's Day through a different scenario. And that's so back to beliefs. Our beliefs generate feelings, feelings generate vibration. Horses tune into the vibration. So, yes, it's our nervous system, but it's actually more complex than that. It's actually the vibrations of our emotions that the horses are tuning into. And horses
A lot
can't
of
help.
people and a lot of people are not aware how they function at that level. Like
Many people are not
like I
aware.
can bring if you'd like, I can bring an example to that
Sure.
from all of this. It's like I know what I want with Charlie. I want that chocolate truffle that Kimberly talks about, which is described in the episode of Co-Created Rides. It's that I want to explore with my horse in partnership, co-creating. I want that sense of adventure and that sense of connection. And those are the rides that matter to me. Those are really the rides that matter to me. And yeah, there's this other, like, oh, let's go trail riding with friends, that is about belonging and inclusion. And I like this week had all of this sadness come up with the idea that might be gone for me. Like I saw a Facebook thing of a couple of friends, trailering and riding from Eugene, which is like an hour away, to a place that's really much closer to me. That I I have a trailer, I have horses, but because of where I am, things that a lot of horse people take for granted because they do it with habituation, they do it with dominance, of putting your horse in the trailer and going for a ride, because of some of the things I've been through and some of my experiences, that isn't even on the table for me right now. And all of this like loss of that, what is the emotion there? It's that not belonging that goes
There it is.
so deep. got uncovered because I don't experience a lot of that anymore, but I certainly did as a child.
Sure.
And so that's the kind of thing you're talking about. And when I'm with Charlie and we're connecting on the ground, it's this wonderful thing like you described, including all of the hormones and neurochemicals. And I've experienced that chocolate truffle of a ride lots of times, but not recently. And so yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah,
And what I
absolutely.
don't and what I don't want and what I need to work through. And that's only a piece of the fear. Like as you described all these different experiences, like seeing that trainer come off was horrible. The 3 times I've been thrown from a horse are, in my memory somewhere. Although when you were talking about that, it's really interesting because as I've worked the memory chains of EMDR, not once has a trauma on a horse been part of that chain. Like it's kind of amazing to me, like what, and I've got some curiosity about what's happening from a neurochemical perspective that those experiences like childbirth is incredibly painful, but that's not part of trauma on my memory chain, and neither is being thrown from a horse.
I can explain specifically why that happens, right?
Okay.
And so it has to do with two different types of stress. There's distress and there is eustress. And so everything that I teach goes back to our human blueprint. Again, the support of or challenge to your blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
And so we enter situations that are stressful, that could be seen as traumatic, right? But if we can see that the situation that we've entered is somehow connected to our highest values, then when we experience it or we think about it, because whether you're remembering it, you're living it, or you're imagining it, your body responds exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
We enter into a state of eustress, which is a positive stress that actually does release positive chemicals in our body. If we enter into a scenario that is seen as traumatic and we cannot connect it to our values, we cannot connect it to our blueprint, then we will enter into a state of distress. And that's where we start to release negative chemicals. So when things are high in your values, like family, like horses, when you are challenged in those areas that are in your top 3 to 5, your body does not respond the same because you're releasing different chemicals into your body. That's why a lot of times people do get bucked off and they get right back on. If you got attacked in a parking lot and you got away, you aren't going back into the parking lot to get attacked again. But if you get bucked off a horse, you want to get right back on. And again, that goes back to your perspective. These things are of high value to you. And so you do process those things differently. When you think about them, they release a different chemical into your body, and that creates different types of neural pathways in your brain. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. But there's another part of this as well, and I'm trying to take this is just so deep, and I'm trying to take it full circle in the allotted amount of time that we have. But there is also a universal law called the law of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without.
Mm-hmm.
And so our primary program happens to us through the experiences we have before the age of 12.
Mm-hmm.
So your brain was very neuroplastic and your beliefs about yourself were getting programmed into you. And this is all happening up until the age of 12. At the age of 12, our brain waves shift into a beta brainwave state, which is where the gates to our subconscious are locked. Whatever's in there is in there. And our brain actually changes. And then we live the rest of our life in these feedback loops of our core programming. And our core programming is done in the forms of beliefs. So, whatever you were taught about yourself by your environment before the age of 12, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm stupid, nobody likes me, I can't do anything right, I'm clumsy. Whatever negative beliefs are in there have to be reprogrammed in order for you to change. And so then, because as within, so without, our environment is constantly responding to all of this that's in here. And horses are a part of that. I mean, I believe, when your car breaks down, I believe that that's feedback for you. When you walk through a doorway and you bang your shoulder, that's feedback. Every single thing in our environment is
Mhm.
talking to us all the time, trying to wake us up to where we are out of alignment with our authentic self. And horses just seem to do this at a really amplified level because of who and what they are. And so, when we talk about, I know you had mentioned that you have guilt about this horse trainer as well, and I certainly don't want to bring somebody into this that's not here to participate or reveal anything about that person. But what I can tell you just from the hundreds of people I've worked who have had horse accidents and my own personal horse accident, it is feedback trying to wake you up to the fact that somewhere in your life you are selling yourself out. You are not being authentic. You are not being in alignment. And I had a really bad accident on my heart horse. I was, dating a guy who just come back from Iraq. He was being awful. He wasn't integrating well. I had this heart horse I had him so well trained. We rode bridleless, and I'd gotten in an argument with this guy, and I got on my horse, and he was very different in that moment, and we were trying to teach the baby Mustangs to pony, and my lariat kind of grazed his flank, which wasn't new, and he sent me end over end, and I smashed my collarbone. But when I learned all of this stuff, and I learned that everything has a spiritual message for you that happens in your life, I realized that going through that experience woke me up to where I was allowing things in my life that I shouldn't have been allowing.
What is the collarbone? I've broken mine twice, and you've broken yours, and she broke hers. And now I got to know. In
So
your
did
book,
her clavicle end up being
it's shattered.
all great changes preceded by chaos? I believe that the amount of chaos that ensues, it will be in direct proportion to the amount of impact that whatever's going to happen happens, right? The collarbone symbolizes the transmission of heartfelt truth into authentic expression. And so if there's injury in the collarbone, it's a difficulty speaking from your heart, or you're holding back your truth due to fear of judgment or rejection. So the clavicle also carries burdens and emotional weight and a sense of over responsibility. So if I look back to when I broke my collarbone, I was having to carry all the burdens. I had two kids. I was running a boarding and training facility. If it happens on the left side of your body, that's the feminine side. So that's like family or physical or social. And the right side is more mental, vocational, and financial. And I know at that time, I mean, running a boarding business I just felt like I can't keep going like this. I have so much responsibility. I have so many people's horses to take care of. I have so much financial burden, the cost of hay is, so I always tell people when you get into an accident, a horse accident, look at what was going on in your life 3 days prior to that accident happening, because there's information in there. And so we call it feedback. Everything is feedback. And there's 4 different types of feedback. So the first type of feedback is psychological feedback. That's when something comes into your experience and you see it as a support or challenge, right? So when we're living outside of our blueprint, something happens in our environment. We're like, ooh, this is outside of my scope. This is not fueling me. This is going to deplete me. But if I don't say yes, people won't like me. If I don't say yes, I'm going to get kicked out of the tribe, and then I won't have safety and resources and so on and so forth. So we're like, okay, yeah, I'll do that thing that I don't want to do. And then it's like, ugh, like a gut punch. Like you commit to something you don't want to do and you feel sick,
Yeah.
right? That turns into physical feedback. But again, we don't want to get kicked out of the tribe because that's our safety and security. So then we continue to sell ourselves out, and we get this physical feedback, and we don't care. We just put our heads down and press on. then it comes into our environment. We get environmental feedback, and that typically shows up in our relationships. Maybe it's an argument with a spouse or a child. Maybe it's a coworker or dealing with a boss at work, but something happens, starts to happen in our relationships. Or it can happen with our horses, even, the horse doesn't want to come up to you, or the horse is stuck in its feet. It doesn't want to move forward. It doesn't want to cooperate. That's also environmental feedback. And then the fourth level of feedback I call the pattern disrupt. It is the thing that happens to you that is so painful that it has to invoke some type of change in your life, right? So
Yeah, I've had some of those.
when
Yeah.
I broke my clavicle, I could no longer muck stalls for, a month. I had to have surgery. I went from taking care of everybody to having to be taken care of. I was in this relationship with a person I thought cared about me. And when he was so mad at me that I did this, and all he was doing was like ridiculing me. So it was an eye opener that, I'm selfish because I have horses and I shouldn't be getting hurt. And it was like, wow, I think the universe was trying to tell me for like 8 years prior that this person shouldn't be in my life anymore, but I wouldn't listen, right? And so when we don't listen, things in our life escalate, especially things with our horses. And that's what leads us to the injury. And I can say this now because I have worked with literally thousands of people. And when I take them to that moment of the pattern disrupt and we unpack that and we integrate it, they can always see. They can always see where they were selling themselves
Sure.
out. And so we had chatted a little bit before you hit record, about the EMDR therapy. And so, and I'm of the opinion, if it works for you, keep doing it. Different strokes for different folks. EMDR, I've met some people that have said it has been super helpful. Before I learned any of the healing work that I do now, EMDR was the only thing that had remotely moved the needle forward for me. So I'm glad that I experienced it, and it got me to a point where I could do other work on my traumas that really needed to be done. I also know some people that have had horrific experiences where it's really set them back. So, I don't have any judgment or opinions on any type of treatment. If it's working, do it. However, the thing that I observed with the EMDR for myself personally and for a lot of the veterans that I've worked with is that, with EMDR, you create like a box, right? And you put stuff in a box, or at least I did. I had to create like a safe box, and then I could put anything in the box, and then it couldn't get to me. And, I had this memory of my mom and this abusive situation. And when I went and did the EMDR on it, it was like in my mind built a brick wall, and my mom couldn't get through the wall to get to me. And so I made something up about the experience that wasn't true, but it detached me from the emotion of it, because then when I would go to the memory, instead of her actually getting to me and hurting me, she never got to me. She was stopped by this brick wall. Okay, so that's great. Like, it got me to a point where I could do other things. But in all of the trauma work that I do now, in conjunction with integration and the laws of the universe, what I do now is, if we're working on a trauma with somebody, we go back into the actual memory and we balance and pull in things from the other side, not to change reality. If you can't deal with something in a moment, you put it in the box.
And there may be different applications of the box. I mean, every therapist is different, every person is different. So the other thing I wanted to comment on is, it did occur to me at some point that doing this EMDR is being so effective for me, because the way I term it is, so many different things and so many different modalities over the years, starting from my very early 20s, did I pull everything out up to that point and look at it and do very gestalt things and work with Jungian type of psychology. And then at different points in my life, again, have pulled all of this stuff out and applied different modalities to it. So by the time I've arrived at EMDR, it's like the reverse of what you've done or experienced, maybe with the veterans and yourself, is that you've done the EMDR, and now you're finding that we still need to unpack this stuff, and that's what you're speaking to now. So I guess the question is, does the order seem important?
Well, my answer is going to be it depends. I don't think that's really I think that's a generalized question that would have to be, there's very many nuances to that. But I think, what I realized, and again, I'm so grateful that I had it when I did. It certainly helped me get to this point. But what I have learned since then, and I feel like what I currently do works so well with any other application that you're doing, is that when we work with the things that happen, what we're actually doing is we're extracting really important information out of those challenging times. And we're not just seeing it as something that shouldn't have happened to me.
Right.
Right? Because if I have a trauma and then I'm told or I believe that shouldn't have happened to me, then I'm going to wake up every day and go, oh my gosh, something happened to me that shouldn't have happened to me. And so I'm not saying that anything should or shouldn't happen to people, but I see what the belief this shouldn't have happened to me does to people. It deteriorates them from the inside out. So a lot of the work that we do isn't necessarily in, we call it the right, wrong, good, bad perspective or the should, shouldn't perspective, but the cause and effect perspective, right? And so I still think that work needs done in the cause and effect perspective, or we keep reliving the pattern, like it keeps showing up in our environment. It shows up and shows up. And so I listen to your initial, and I say all of that, and it's relevant because you said, I feel like every time I do an EMDR session, something chaotic comes in and it happens. And so I'm just curious,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying I certainly have the answer, but it sparked a question in me of, does that have something to do with the law of correspondence?
Yes.
And are we getting the lesson? Or I guess I would say, it seems like we're not, we can dull the emotional impact that the memory has on us. I
Mhm.
mean, can be super, super beneficial. But to me, if we're not getting the wisdom of the feedback of the experience,
So let me clarify a little bit of that.
it's an incomplete.
It's an incomplete. When the issue of wherever I am in the memory chain and what happens, let me explain a little bit, is, we set up a memory from the memory chain working chronologically. And as we set up that memory, then the next session, we do, a dot on the computer screen or some kind of bilateral stimulation that reduces the intensity of the experience. And then we come in and say, what was a negative belief you had about yourself then? And then she'll say, and what would you rather believe? So then we create a new belief system that gets imposed on that experience as it's been desensitized, I think. And I guess it has to do with moving this around in the brain. But during the time between the two sessions is where I'm talking about. And that's where I have noticed repeatedly that whatever is open in the memory chain where we've brought it up, we've set it up, but we haven't processed it yet, I'm experiencing a similar thing in real time, which does allow me to work on it at a less intense, it allows my subconscious mind to explore it, examine it, re-experience it at a much lesser intensity level because it's a different situation and it's in real time. So somehow, I don't know that everybody experiences that, but that's been my experience. And that's what happened this day. And it may be very interestingly and a coincidence of whatever the message was for the trainer with the collarbone, like we all bring something to the experience energetically. Charlie brings something, I bring something, I bring my beliefs, I bring where I am in the EMDR, he brings his experiences, she brings hers. And it's a coalescence of how we all come together.
Absolutely, because everybody's a vector and everybody's playing a role in everybody else's experience. But what stood out to me most, and I certainly agree, just from the horse training and the mechanics of the situation, it too much too fast was dead on, right?
Mhm.
So if you're not riding Charlie comfortably in the arena at several gates and working with him, we start at the round pen. Can you do transitions at the round pen? Can you do short 10-minute sessions? You know, if you aren't able to communicate with him fully and have his trust and have a good relationship in the
He didn't
round,
have any of that. He didn't have any of those skills.
yeah, then he shouldn't even be in the arena.
Right.
And if you can't do it in the arena, so it was just from a baseline logical perspective, it was too much too fast. He didn't have the appropriate levels, channels of communication on him that he needed to be able to regulate himself in the mountains, So that's just common sense, right? The obvious. But what stood out to me the most, and I would really love to touch on, and I know we're kind of at our time almost, but to me the most important thing was what you had said is I don't have control. I can't do anything. I'm helpless. I'm out of control, or whatever you were saying in that situation. And so typically when I work with somebody that's been through a horse accident or has experienced any type of challenge or trauma, is I ask them to go to that moment. How do you see yourself in that moment? What are the beliefs that you believe about yourself in that moment? I am what?
It is about responsibility. What, how far does my influence and responsibility go? And if I don't push, control, exert everything that in both these cases would be a really big response to control the environment of other people for a better outcome for everybody, if I roll it back.
Okay. So everything that you just said to me was about other people.
Yeah.
So what's the belief? I what? I what?
I want to say, like, the positive belief is that I am not responsible ultimately for what happens to other people.
Okay. But what's the negative belief in there before you came to that conclusion?
I'm not sure. It's like I could have prevented this, I could have prevented that, but I couldn't. Like
Well,
it's in that space of I should have done more.
so how about, so just again, taking from your words and the things that I've heard you say as you speak about this, it's like, I wanted to do more, but I didn't. I wanted to tell her to get off more
or
firmly,
or I
but I
couldn't.
didn't.
In the case with her, I I could have been more forceful, but would that have been appropriate? In the case from the EMDR, I didn't know what else to do. Like I had tried and tried and tried, and I didn't know what else to do.
So is there like I can't trust myself and I'm not capable, or like what, we got to go deeper. I what? I'm not in control. And so I don't have it pulled up here, but
It's
I have
kind
it.
of like I should have known more things to do. I should have had more knowledge. I should have acted differently.
Okay, so what, we got to turn that into a belief. So I'm not capable. I'm not enough. I'm not,
I have blind spots that I don't understand.
okay. I don't understand.
And I do, like, as an autistic person, I'm just learning that I have these blind spots that I do not fully understand.
Okay,
And then some of it is like, I mean, the incident from the EMDR is my son's suicide.
right. So if you go to that moment,
Mhm.
how do you see yourself in that moment? I what?
I did the best I could. I mean, I've come through that section and I've got it down to like a 1. I did the best I could.
Yes, absolutely you did. And you are not responsible for other people, right? And so you've done a lot of work on that.
Mhm.
But what I'm seeing is that there's still a core belief, and we've got to get to the root of it. We've got to identify specifically what is that belief, because that keeps repeating itself. And we've got to balance and integrate that belief in order to get it to stop repeating itself. And I'm curious, and we'll get it, but I'm curious how Charlie will respond differently to you once we can identify this belief and integrate it.
Mhm.
So let's go back to the scene, because again, both of these scenes have to do with stuff that you can't do anything about, right? It's
Mhm.
happening and you can't do anything about it.
Mhm.
So how do you see yourself in that moment? I am what? I
A
am not in
like I'm like a
control. I am
witness. I'm not
helpless.
in control, and I'm a witness. Yeah,
Is there any helplessness in there?
yeah, definitely helplessness. Like it's really hard to watch things just happen and try to interact with them and have it not make a difference.
Okay, so would you say that would be helplessness?
Yes.
Okay, good. When you said that, I got chills in my body. So, have you done any work on being helpless?
You mean sat with it, moved through it? Give me more
Anything?
information. Yeah, I mean, I've done some. I mean,
Okay.
probably
So,
not enough. Probably not enough. Because you know what? I just realized it's happening again right now with another situation, real time, today.
okay. So see, so there it is. So that's what we've got to get out. That's the root, right? And so everything else that we're working on are symptoms, which is fine. But if we don't pull the root, we're just managing the symptoms. We're running with that rubber band. So are you open to just trying a short
Sure,
experiment?
sure.
Okay. All right. So if you go back, and we'll just do it on this Charlie memory specifically, but you can do this with any memory. So if you go back to that moment and you see yourself and Charlie's bucking the trainer and you're just standing there and you're like, I am totally helpless.
Well, the moment would
This,
be when she was turning circles and I said, "Why don't you get off?" It would be that moment, I think. Because
okay, then go to that
that's the
moment.
moment that
Go to
I
that
could
moment.
have I could have done something differently.
Do you see yourself as being helpless in that moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes and no. I mean, both moments. I'm helpless in both moments.
Go to the moment that you see yourself as most helpless.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's when he was bucking, when they were coming at me and
Yep.
he's buck. It's the moment in
Yep.
between when he's coming down the hill at a canter and then
Yep.
begins to buck. Yeah, that moment.
Good. Okay. So in that moment, you see yourself as helpless.
Mhm.
When you think about that, what do you notice in your body?
There's like a hollow feeling around my heart in my chest.
Okay. All right. So I just want you to close your eyes. So in that moment, you were physically helpless, right? Because there was nothing you could do to stop anyone at that moment.
Right.
Right. Okay. So that is one area of life, but we have several other areas of life. There's spiritual, there's mental, there's social, there's family, there's vocational. Okay. So, in that very moment where you see yourself as being helpless physically to the situation that is happening, what would you say in that scene the opposite of helpless would have been?
Integrated, connected, present.
Okay, great. So, go back into that moment.
Mhm.
So, physically, you were disconnected, but
Mhm.
where were you actually connected in that moment?
To what was happening and why it was happening.
So what's the connection there?
It's spiritual.
Good. So I just want you to go back into that scene and I want you to see where you actually were connected spiritually.
Yeah. And yeah, I've got goosebumps in the series of events that I am here as a player playing my part.
Okay, good. So those goosebumps that you have right now,
Mhm,
that's your neural pathways in your brain starting to light back up,
mhm.
and that's your brain chemistry balancing. So I want you to close your eyes again. Where else were you connected in that moment?
I was connected with my horse Sipsy, who was in
Yep.
my hand.
Good. So just go back in there and see yourself being connected to Sipsy in that moment.
Yeah, I can actually feel her grounding with me in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Good. Were you using your voice at all?
No,
Okay. If you go back into that memory, can you see anywhere else that you were actually connected?
I can, as I go into the memory, I can feel my feet and I can feel an expansiveness from my head upward, like a earth sky connection.
Great, great. Okay. So when you go back to that moment,
Mhm.
how does it help you feel to know that you actually were connected in that moment?
It feels like things are dissipating. Like I can almost, as I close my eyes, feel an energy leaving my body from the sides of it's not so personal.
Great. And so now that you know that it's not so personal, how does that help you feel? What's the specific emotion?
I feel much more present and integrated.
Good. And so if you close your eyes, where do you feel present in your body?
And my entire torso radiating into my limbs.
Okay. And I want you to give that a color.
Purple.
Great. And now I want you to grow that purple color feeling of integration, and I want you to just fill up your body.
Okay.
And I want you to see that purple color actually radiating, dissipating out of your body. It's going to fill up your house. It's going to fill up your land. It's going to go up and it's going to fill up Charlie and Sipsy. And you're just going to fill your whole little property there with that beautiful purple presence and integration.
Right. And it had knew exactly where to go because I do the like energy bubble of light over my property as a
Perfect.
practice. So, yeah. Wow. Are we done?
Yeah. So
That was
think
amazing.
people, so this is just, I mean, it's the most powerful thing, and obviously a full session is far more nuanced and long than that, but that's just a little taste of something that we can do. And now if you just take some time, you know, I like to do it before I go to bed, when I wake up in the morning, just continue to bring up that color.
Hmm.
And so just to kind of bring it full circle, right? You had said originally when we started talking about what you were wanting from your horse,
Hmm.
it kind of got pared down to being connected,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so what happened in this incident, because you weren't seeing the connection, led to the polarity happening, right? And so now we've expanded your perspective to see that, yeah, it doesn't take away from anything that was there or anything that did happen. We're not trying to take away the negative,
Hmm.
but everything has two sides, and everything has two sides to the same degree in every container. And so all we're doing is bringing up the other side to show that there was actually balance in that moment.
Right. So
We need
this is taking that little nugget of wisdom that says like anytime we're having an opinion, it's a brain instead of a heart thing. Anytime we're having an opinion, we as humans automatically lock onto the arguments that support our opinion. And what we really need to be doing is looking for all the information, not just what already supports our opinion, because that's how we find balance. And that happens in our head. And what you're doing is happening in our heart and our soul.
absolutely. And it's connecting the heart and the brain because they can heal each other.
Yeah.
So
This is amazing, Amanda. Thank you for that demonstration. And wow.
absolutely. Thank you for being willing to share and be vulnerable and for all of the work that you're doing to try to help everybody get this important work out to horses and humans.
Yeah. So good. I'm going to pause the recording now.